Hey, how's it going?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm
We're
doing
good. Thanks,
All
Sydney.
right, we can dive right in. You two are both starring in the all-new thriller The Toll. Something I love about this film is through the main element, it's very sinister and scary. We kind of get a lot of insight into the personal aspects of the characters, and you guys portray that so well. I feel like we really do learn a lot about you guys. Jordan, we first meet your character, Cami. She's coming out of an airport. She's going to see her dad. Can you tell us a little bit about Cami and her character and what she goes through throughout the film?
yeah. I mean, I don't want to give too much away, but Cami is, like you said, she's getting into a ride share like a lot of us do every other day, aside from being in the pandemic. It's something that is just part of society right now. And what I love the most about Cami, what drew me to her, was that she is this very strong female character. And as the movie progresses, you come to find out that she has had a little bit of a storied past, but she never really identifies herself as a victim or as a survivor. And she allows her traumas from the past to actually make her into a stronger person, which I think is such an admirable quality.
Absolutely. You do such a beautiful job portraying that. I really love that. Now, Max, your character Spencer is a little bit different from Cammy. He's a rideshare driver, and we get a little insight that he's a little socially awkward. He kind of has his own stuff going on. Tell me a little bit about him.
I play Spencer. He's a rideshare driver in rural Michigan. His backstory, I worked a lot with Michael Nader, our director, on, and just kind of understanding where he lives, who he lives with, kind of his social world that he, isn't able to participate, doesn't have a whole lot of, friends, is really trying to create some sort of an emotional bond every step of the way. And so I feel like that was a great place to start, and then really get into his head and understand his wants, yearns, and kind of needs. And so I don't want to give too much away either, but that would be the starting point with who I came into with Spencer.
I feel like you could really see that. What challenges did you guys face during filming? Was channeling that sinister energy difficult, or do you think it came natural?
uh, I think it came pretty natural. I think it was an intense shoot. There was a lot of difficult situations. The budget was, tight, and we were trying to do a lot. So I think, just because we were so not anxiety ridden, but we just had so much on our plates, it really allowed us to approach these performances that were, almost piercing. We were living such intense lives outside of the acting. As soon as we got into the acting, it was just intense.
I can imagine. I love that perspective. How about you, Jordan?
Yeah, it was a difficult shoot. We were shooting nights, which are always tough because you have to kind of readjust your clock. So we would be shooting nights, and then Max and I would sleep for about 3 hours, and then we would have to wake up and we'd have to start producing the actual movie, calling our vendors, talking to all of our suppliers, going to do a run at the camera house to pick up a lens, whatever it was. So it was a huge undertaking. It was a lot to do. But I think that it made us better producers because of it, and hopefully some of that grit and that tenacity made its way into the movie.
Definitely. Have you guys had prior experience working in horror? How is this genre different from other things you've done?
Yeah, well, Max, I mean, this is definitely different than Suits.
Yes, definitely different than Suits.
A
Uh,
little.
it's I think in the end, committing to a character is always just committing to a character. It doesn't matter what genre it's in. uh, if you're really saying I am going to give 100% of myself to this performance, genre does not matter. So like I so enjoy horror, I so enjoy all kinds of genre films, but I also love comedy and I love drama. But I think with this film specifically, the packaging was horror, but really it's a drama in many ways, and really it's a psychological thriller in many ways. And there's family dynamics and relationships at play. It's not just a slasher gory horror, which is what I really appreciate about this film.
100%. How about you, Jordan? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. Like Max said, I mean, any film really is relying on characters and their relationships, and everything else is just kind of window dressing and however you want to, whatever kind of device you want to use to tell that story. And so, yeah, I worked a lot in like science fiction and stuff, and it's the same thing, you know, whether you're, you know, on Helix, I was a scientist who was, you know, dealing with this virus that caused people to turn into zombies. And it's like, at the end of the day, you're just playing a person, you're playing a character. And as long as you can keep that real, and keep your thumb on the humanity of a character, it doesn't really matter what genre you're working in.
Definitely. Something I find so admirable is when people take on multiple roles, both behind the scenes, both on the scene, within films, and you guys do just that. You're both starring, but you're also producing. What was that like? Did you face any challenges in that?
Yeah, it was really, really tough. Yeah. Yeah, it was just tough because we were wearing so many hats and not sleeping very much, like we said. And but it's also it's gratifying. Like Max and I, you know, Max has been acting since he was 6 years old. I've been acting since not that young, but since I was in my 20s at least. Um, and yeah, we both just kind of decided that acting just wasn't quite enough for us, and we wanted to be storytellers behind the screen as well. And it's a whole different set of challenges when you're producing. But I think one of the things that we love the most about it is just the family that we've created with our crew and with the other storytellers that we have within the 4am family. And yeah, just being able to work with other talented people and being able to tell stories across all different kind of mediums.
Yeah, you know, what I find just so exciting about producing is what's a story that you want to tell? Okay, go make it. You know, you have the choice to decide what gets made and what doesn't. You're going to have to fight your butt off to get it made, but you're making the choice. And I think that's incredibly exciting.
100%. It's one thing to kind of tell a story, and then it's another thing to really put on that story and make that story. And you guys do both of those things. And that is so incredible. You guys both play incredibly unique characters with very unique circumstances. How did you prepare for these roles? What was that process like?
Yeah, I mean, I worked with Michael Nader, the director, on the backstory of Cammy, and we kind of came to like an understanding of what she had gone through and what was going to show up on screen. And then, yeah, I mean, Michael did a great job in terms of creating a lot of subtext within the script. So really being able to play the beats that are underneath the lines was really helpful. And yeah, just, you know, reading about stories that had happened to women in ride shares and just working on like the trauma and making sure that that was underneath everything.
Yeah. Um, I just felt like I needed to know who this guy was to his core, or else I wouldn't have been able to kind of make Cammy and the audience feel for him when he needs that and wants that, and not feel for him at other points. So I would do things, you know, just relating this character back to all sorts of friends and family that I know from my life, and taking bits and pieces of each and every one of them. And then doing things like, you know, going for an Uber ride to nowhere and just chatting with the Uber driver to understand why they do what they do. And so I think between those two things, and really, you know, discussing with Michael Nader, like who this man is, who is Spencer, we were able to find who he was. And I think it was a fun experience.
Absolutely. There are so many incredibly intense scenes in this film. You have the toll man, you have this mysterious lady. Which scenes did you find most difficult to film? Was there anything that stuck out particularly?
Hmm. Um, yeah, I mean, for me, it was pretty much just any of the hallucinations from Cammy's past that were difficult, but also I think like the meat of her character. So difficult, but also very satisfying.
Yeah. I would say some of the driving stuff, even though it was just so much fun, so natural, and I just love that dialogue off the top of the film. It was really tricky because the first time we tried to shoot that was our first day of principal, right, Jordan? And
Yeah.
I think we were still in producer mindset and just making sure that everything was working day one. I didn't know one line. I did not know one line in that. And it was good and bad in the sense that it probably allowed for some natural-ish improv, which is a good way to start the film, to be so natural and organic and conversational. But at the same time, it made it really difficult because then Jordan couldn't get her coverage because I couldn't. So anyway, there were a lot of issues at play, but that's the trade-off of, you know, producing and acting. You gotta at as soon as it's action, you gotta be in it as an actor. And as soon as you call cut, you gotta make sure that you put out the fires as the producer. So it's a delicate balance.
I feel like that's such a unique experience, and it's really cool that you guys have this insight on that. That's awesome. Now, this film has, you kind of see inside dreams, you see inside hallucinations. So much is happening in a really good way, and you kind of like can't stop watching it. What's in your own words, what would you say your interpretation of this film is? Do you think it has a meaning? Well, obviously it has a meaning, but what do you think it is?
Yeah, I think it's a lot about past traumas, and it's about um, reliving your worst fears and your worst memories and really coming to terms with that trauma and how you deal with it.
Mm-hmm. There are so many themes at play here, but one theme that I really like, and you might not get it until you watch the movie in full, but it's don't judge a book by its cover, except maybe do sometimes. You know, it's like, you know, really look at all possible options, but sometimes don't look away from the obvious. So yeah, that's just one theme that kind of resonates with me.
I can totally see that. What was it like working with Michael Nader? How was he as a director?
He's great. Yeah, he's very, very talented. I love working with writer-directors because they just know the story better than anybody else, and it really is one streamlined vision. Whereas a lot of the time when you're working with a writer or director, they might not see eye to eye on certain issues. So yeah, I thought he did an amazing job. It was his first feature, and I think he really accomplished a lot. And yeah, we put a lot of trust in him, and I think it paid off.
Yeah. And he's just so he's not afraid to use his past experience, to use some of his, you know, anxieties or self-consciousness within himself. He puts it out there and he explores it. And to me, that is a filmmaker, you know, someone who's not afraid to kind of bear a little bit of what's in them. That is a filmmaker who's challenging themselves and making great work.
Absolutely. And it really shows through in this film, and I'm really excited for people to see it. What about the film are you most excited for viewers to see? And what do you hope they take away from it?
Yeah, I hope that this just really sparks a conversation about where we're at with technology and how trusting we are. Not to pass judgment on anything. Like, I take ride shares all the time. I love it. I love talking to strangers. But just to kind of start a conversation about how trusting we are, and just for women to really trust their instincts.
Yeah. I mean, I think Jordan answered that beautifully. That's what I would like people to take from it as well.
100%. We need to be having those conversations, and I feel like in a really unique way, this really pushes it, which I absolutely love. Last but certainly not least, what's up next for you guys? What can we expect to see from you in the future?
We've got some really cool stuff coming, Sydney. We've shot 2 projects during the pandemic. So we have a feature called Fixation, which is starring Maddie Hassan, who has a film called Malignant coming out in September. James Wan, big, huge Warner Brothers flick. And then it's also starring Genesis Rodriguez, who's one of the new leads in Umbrella Academy. So awesome movie. We shot that one, you know, full quarantine, lots of COVID testing. Incredible psychological thriller, definitely still in the genre world. So excited for you to see that. And then we've got a digital series that we just finished called Something Undone, also in the psychological thriller genre, which comes out March 26th as well here in Canada on the CBC. So hopefully that'll come to a global audience as well.
That's so exciting. I'm so excited to see it. How about you, Jordan?
Same thing. Max and I are working on everything together now.
Yes.
So package deal. Yeah.
It's amazing. I'm so excited to see it all. I'm so excited for everyone to see this movie. It's fantastic. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Have an amazing rest of your day. You wrote and directed the all-new thriller film The Toll. To start us off, tell us a little bit about this movie and what it's about.
So it's about a woman that gets into a ride share at the airport at 3 o'clock in the morning, and her driver is just a little bit off, just a little bit strange. And as she and her driver get out closer to her destination, out in the middle of nowhere, they have an encounter with someone in the road. They break down and are now stuck in this unlit street in the middle of the woods and are forced to start trusting each other in order to face what is out there in the darkness.
Super, super interesting. This movie is incredibly unique. I feel like we really don't know who to trust throughout it, which really adds to that suspense aspect. What were your inspirations in writing it?
So I had a few inspirations. So particularly in terms of the suspense, two movies that were big influences for me were Wild Tales, which is an Argentinian film from 2015, and then The Invitation, directed by Karin Kusama. Two movies that are really about like the tension that can be created by just two people being in a room, and just the social interaction as a thriller, and how realistic and just honest depiction of people's behavior can create thrills. And I started with that. And I have always been interested in the social dynamics of rideshare. And so I wondered if I could create a whole movie around the relationship between a driver and a passenger, because it's a unique relationship. It's something that I haven't seen explored, but it always is. There's an element of tension, and there's an element of weirdness of figuring out what your social footing is. And so I liked using that topical element and throwing them into a supernatural horror environment, and creating this character of the Toll Man, who is kind of a Lovecraftian horror icon.
100%. Something I really, really love about the way this is filmed is that kind of minimalistic approach that we see in it. It comes across as anything but minimalistic, actually. It takes place in one set, the woods, for the majority of the film, but it feels like so much more. How did you go about filming this?
Yeah, so I that's exactly what I was hoping to capture, is that it's incredibly small, but I wanted it to feel expansive. And I want there to be claustrophobia, but then I want there to be sort of the agoraphobia of having this vast, dark woods. And so certainly there's one of the major elements of figuring out the movie was having what is this road going to look like, and how are we going to shoot sort of around the car, because that's such a big setting. It's just the two of them kind of moving around in this one space, whereas the car is hopefully their safe place, and then they go out into this kind of more dangerous area, and then they go to the detour. And so it was kind of a matter of delineating these different locations and finding out figure out what they represented to these two characters and to their relationship. And then certainly in terms of filming, we had Jordan Kennington as our DP. He and I wanted a really naturalistic look to go with the minimalism. We wanted it our influences visually were more kind of intimate character dramas, particularly ones that had a thriller element. So like Prisoners and Nocturnal Animals, Ain't the Body Saints, things that had sort of shot night but used a very kind of warm, rich, intense kind of night look, not necessarily the conventional horror look of Blue Moonlight. We wanted it to be a bit more gray and a bit more, let the frame be really dark at times. And so that was kind of one of our big guiding philosophies, and to let all the lighting be strictly as motivated as possible. So it's mostly lit by the headlights of the car and the taillights of the car, and then the flashlight as they're moving through the woods, and just letting it be kind of, letting a lot of the frame be sort of unknown and be in the dark, and just have all that to keep that kind of naturalistic feel.
I love the way you discuss that. I love the way you explain that. I feel like you really have a method to everything, which really makes it come together and be so incredible. When did you start working on this project, and how would you say it's changed since then?
So I started writing it almost 4 years ago to the day. It was early March 2017 is when I started writing it. I have to say, if you looked at the first draft, it's quite similar to how it ended up. I think I had a fairly strong sense from the beginning. That said, I mean, what's so key, what's so crucial, is that the movie doesn't exist without what Max and Jordan bring to the characters of Cammy and Spencer. And Max brings such a sense of humor that wasn't necessarily on the page, and Jordan brings this profound honesty and rawness and life experience to Cammy that I certainly didn't have as a writer. And so it came to life sort of beyond my wildest dreams, in terms of them being such perfect actors for it, and also them being such successful producers of the movie and making it happen. I think on the page it felt very small and like, oh, this is just something that I'm going to write and we'll just see what happens. And for it to have actually been for them to have found the money to do it, and for us to have gotten a crew and put it together has just been a dream.
That's so amazing to hear. I really love that. Without giving too much away, tell me a little bit about the Toll Man and the character he plays throughout the film.
Yeah, so the Topplin is kind of inspired by, in the Middle Ages, there were the sort of highway robbers of the Middle Ages were sort of highwaymen, and they were also kind of described as gentlemen of the road. And I loved that phrase. I loved that conjured such an image of a quiet, dignified, polite kind of front that's hiding this extremely threatening and terrifying presence. And so he kind of is the supernatural take on that sort of highwayman character. And just in the larger world that I love of kind of dark roads and shadowy highways and the road not taken and shortcuts through the woods, I think is such a rich horror environment that I haven't seen enough of that. And so I wanted to kind of find a good character that could fit into that world and be a representative of all of these kinds of the things that are waiting for us hiding in the dark off the sides of the road.
You talked about Jordan and Max kind of taking these characters on and really transforming them into their own ways and bringing something to the table. How did their version of these characters differ from your original interpretation of them?
I think they just both found their own way into both characters, and I think Spencer was much more humorless at first. I also think Spencer was a bit more kind of bro-y and a little bit more of a sort of conventionally threatening guy, as opposed to, I think Max brought more of a socially awkward element that I love, where it's balancing between social awkwardness and creepiness. And so he brought that dynamic. But again, he found the humor in his character. He makes him lovable, which I think is so shocking. It's amazing that he's able to do that. And then, with Jordan, she really brought her own sort of, just her understanding of how she would behave in a car, where I would not have that understanding as a man in a ride share. It's like she was able to sort of like understand what Cammie would do and what her perspective would be on this whole situation. And she really just inhabited the role. She just is an excellent student. I mean, she has photographic memory, and she had her lines down immediately. And so that was such a good starting point, where she goes from there and then can just only add more and more to the character as we went along.
Absolutely. That's amazing that you have such an incredible cast. Now, what would you say your personal interpretation of the film is? What would you say the true meaning behind it is?
It's very much about my own struggles with anxiety, and how anxiety can create these sort of false signals that will deceive you in situations where you can think that you're in danger and you're not, or it can just confuse you. And so I've struggled with that throughout my life, and seeing how it can also be kind of a blessing, and how even if you've been through anxiety, you get the sort of toolkit of survival and of understanding how to get through that. And that is what Cammie and her character represent, is that she's someone that has had this trauma and she's come out the other side of it, and she can now use that in this terrifying night to try and survive. And so that, to me, it's really about that kind of confronting your anxiety and being able to overcome it.
100%. I feel like there's so much depth to this. There's so many conversations being had in this film that we really need to be having, which I absolutely love. Now, this is one of your very first feature films. What have you learned from the process and the experience?
I learned it really was such a crash course in every respect of filmmaking. And so I certainly, I just learned what it was that it's possible to do it. I mean, I was incredibly daunted, and it was exhausting and it was hard, but and there were certainly all sorts of just logistical challenges that were illuminating and sort of, all right, this is how we can kind of tackle this the next time. But I feel like I have a much better sense of how to collaborate with a team and how to kind of come in, and I didn't know any of my crew beforehand, so that was an amazing experience to be able to kind of, you immediately have to get to know somebody and trust them and have them trust you creatively and in logistically executing the movie. So I mean, it was a rewarding experience, and I just feel like I learned just an unimaginable amount from just the whole experience.
Absolutely. Jordan and Max talked about that whole experience of wearing multiple hats. They starred in the film and also produced it. You wrote the film and also directed it. So you also have that experience of wearing those many hats and doing so much in this one experience. What was that experience like for you, taking on those two roles?
Yeah, I mean, I see them as kind of two halves of the same job in a way, and it felt very natural. It felt like it flowed together very naturally. But certainly, there's the element of you have to have two sides of your brain kind of activated at the same time, and that is a challenge, to be able to be thinking in terms of, especially if we were shifting dialogue at the last minute, as what if I'm thinking about that, then I'm also having to think about how to get to light the next setup, essentially, or to get the sort of stunts to go off without a hitch. much. So there's a lot going on, but I mean, on some level, you get into a rhythm once you're sort of multitasking and doing all these things simultaneously, that it starts to it kind of flows together. And it kind of works better to be wearing a lot of hats than to just be focused on one thing, at least for me.
I love that perspective, 100%. Finally, what's up next for you? What are you working on in the future? What can we expect to see?
I have scripts in the pipeline that are kind of similar to the Toll, but a bit bigger and a bit more personal. And so I'm excited to see, off the back of the release of the Toll, I'll see which one I settle on for the next project. So fingers crossed.
I'm so excited to see it. Michael, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited for everyone to see this film. I loved it. It was fantastic. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.